Hello and welcome to our podcast, episode number 52, Dennis Hopper's out-of-this-world adventure in space comedy. I'm Thomas, and as always, here with me, my friend Timothy. Today, we are going to discuss a film called Space Truckers. There will be spoilers. Space Truckers is a 1996 science fiction comedy film about independent space. Trucker John Canyon, who becomes entangled in a cyborg invasion plot while transporting sex dolls and unaware of the true nature of his cargo. Well, Tim, did you enjoy Space Truckers?
I'm afraid I didn't enjoy it quite as much as you did, Thomas. It was certainly an interesting film, but I found it rather predictable and full of cliches. The plot seemed to be more concerned with delivering cheap laughs than building a compelling narrative.
Oh, come on now, Tim. You can't expect every science fiction movie to have the depth and complexity of, say, 2001, A Space Odyssey or Blade Runner. Sometimes you just need a light-hearted romp through space filled with action and humor. And let's face it, not many movies can boast about having Dennis Hopper as their lead actor.
I agree that Mr. Hopper is always a welcome addition to any film, but in this case, I found his performance rather over the top and campy. It didn't quite fit the tone of the movie for me. And while we're on the topic of performances, what did you think about Stephen Dorff as Mike?
Well, I thought he did a decent job in the role. He had some good moments with Dennis Hopper and Debi Mazar, who played the part of Cindy. However, I have to admit that I found it rather strange how their characters went from being complete strangers to suddenly becoming so close throughout the course of this adventure.
Yes, I agree with you there, Tom. The character development was rather lacking in this film. But let's not forget about Charles Dance as Jay Saggs, the CEO, who hatches a diabolical plan involving cyborgs. His performance was quite enjoyable, don't you think?
I have to admit that Charles Dance did bring a certain level of menace to his role as E.J. Saggs. However, even his performance couldn't save some of the plot holes and inconsistencies in the story. For example, how did he manage to create an entire army of cyborgs without anyone noticing? And why did he decide to wait until they were on their way back to Earth before launching his attack? These questions left me feeling somewhat unsatisfied with the overall narrative arc.
I agree with you there, Thomas. The plot holes in Space Truckers were indeed numerous and quite distracting at times. However, I did appreciate the film's attempt to tackle some deeper themes, such as corporate greed and the dangers of unchecked power. It was rather refreshing to see a science fiction movie that didn't shy away from commenting on contemporary issues, even if it wasn't always successful in doing so.
Yes. I have to say that I found the political undertones quite interesting as well. The privatization of Earth and the government becoming a corporation was certainly an original idea, but at the same time, it felt like the film was trying to do too much with its storyline. There were just so many plot points crammed into this 90-minute movie that none of them really had time to breathe or develop fully.
I have to admit that you've got a point there, Tom. The pacing was rather rushed, and the film could have benefited from some additional character development and world building. However, despite its flaws, I still found Space Truckers to be an enjoyable enough viewing experience, thanks mainly to its quirky sense of humor and some memorable action sequences. What about you? Would you recommend this film to others, or are there better science fiction comedies out there in your opinion?
Well, Tim, I think it really depends on what kind of audience one is looking for. If they're fans of campy, over-the-top science fiction films with a generous helping of cheesiness, then yes, Space Truckers might be right up their alley. However, If they're after something more captivating and well-crafted then, there are definitely better options out there in the genre. Personally, I would say that this is one of those movies that's best enjoyed with a group of friends and some popcorn on a rainy Sunday afternoon when you're in the mood for something light-hearted and uncomplicated. Well said, Tim. Now, speaking of behind-the-scenes tidbits, did you know that the actress who played the role of Cindy, Debi Mazar, was actually pregnant during filming? The costume designers had to come up with some very creative solutions to hide her baby bump throughout the movie. They even had to create a special latex suit for her character to wear in one particular scene where she's supposed to be naked.
No, I didn't know that, Thomas. That's quite impressive, actually. It just goes to show how dedicated the cast and crew were to making this movie happen, despite any challenges that might arise during production. I also heard that there was a scene where Dennis Hopper had to interact with an animatronic creature, but he ended up spending most of his time improvising lines with it because the special effects team couldn't get the robot to function properly on set.
Oh, really? Well, that sounds like quite a funny story, actually. I wonder how much of Dennis Hopper's ad-libs made it into the final cut of the film. It just goes to show you how unpredictable and chaotic filmmaking can sometimes be. Despite all its flaws, though, Space Truckers still manages to remain an enjoyable watch, thanks in large part to these little quirks and anecdotes from its production history.
I have to agree with you there, Tom. It's always fascinating to learn about the behind-the-scenes stories of our favorite films, especially when they add a layer of charm or humor to an already enjoyable viewing experience. And speaking of which, let's not forget about some of the memorable quotes from this movie, like "You can't spell cyborg without crybaby," or "What do you mean no gas? This thing runs on whiskey." Those lines alone are worth sitting through this film, in my opinion.
Exactly, Tim. Those quotes are indeed classic examples of the movie's unique brand of humor. And who could forget about Yi J. Saggs's iconic line, "I don't care if you're a cyborg or not, that's still my daughter's vagina." That scene alone is enough to make any fan of campy science fiction films laugh out loud. In conclusion, while Space Truckers may have its fair share of flaws and shortcomings, it remains an endearing example of a film that knows exactly what kind of movie it wants to be, a light-hearted, over-the-top adventure in space filled with quirky characters and unforgettable moments. And for those reasons alone, I believe it deserves its place in the pantheon of cult classic science fiction comedies.
You know, Thomas, I was just thinking about how the film's director, Stuart Gordon, managed to capture the essence of a classic space opera while still infusing it with his own unique style and sense of humor. The film's visual effects are quite impressive for its time, especially considering the relatively modest budget it had to work with. Do you think that was one of the reasons why this movie managed to find an audience despite its initial failure at the box office?
Well, I certainly believe that the film's visuals played a significant role in attracting viewers and creating a memorable experience for those who did manage to catch it during its festival run. But I also think that Gordon's decision to keep the tone light-hearted and focus more on character-driven comedy rather than heavy-handed action sequences helped set this film apart from other sci-fi movies of its era. It's not often you see a film like Space Truckers which manages to balance between being an homage to classic space operas and a parody of them at the same time. I think that's what makes it such an enduring cult classic today.
Exactly, Thomas. I completely agree with you there. The film's ability to poke fun at itself while still managing to deliver on thrilling action sequences and memorable one-liners is a testament to Gordon's directing skills and the talent of the entire cast and crew. It just goes to show that sometimes taking a risk and trying something different can pay off in unexpected ways.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Tim. And speaking of which, let's not forget about our favorite character, Mike, and his transformation from a by-the-book trucker into a rebel leader who stands up against corporate greed. What did you think about Stephen Dorff's portrayal of Mike? Did you find it convincing, or did he fall short in your opinion?
Well, to be honest, Thomas, I thought Dorff did an admirable job in the role of Mike. He managed to capture both the character's initial reluctance and later resolve quite well throughout the film. However, I do agree that there were some moments where his performance seemed a bit forced or over the top, especially during the scenes involving his romantic entanglement with Cindy. But overall, I think he did an adequate job in bringing Mike to life on screen.
Fair enough, Tim. And now that we've discussed the film's direction and cast performances, let me ask you this. If you had the chance to change one aspect of Space Truckers, be it a plot point or character development, what would it be and why?
That's an interesting question, Tom. If I had to choose just one aspect of the film that I would change, it would probably be the pacing. As we've discussed earlier, there were so many plot points crammed into this 90-minute movie that some of them inevitably felt rushed or underdeveloped. If they had taken their time with the story and fleshed out certain aspects more thoroughly, like Mike's relationship with VJ, Sags, for example, I think it would have made for a stronger narrative overall.
Very true, Tim. And on that note, let me just say thank you again for joining me in this discussion about Space Truckers. It was a fascinating journey through the film's strengths and weaknesses, as well as its lasting impact on popular culture. For those of you who are interested in watching or revisiting this cult classic, we highly recommend giving it another go, preferably with a group of friends, some popcorn, and an open mind for some good old-fashioned sci-fi fun.
Absolutely, Thomas. And speaking of the cast, I have to say that they were all incredibly well suited for their roles in Space Truckers. Dennis Hopper's portrayal of Johnny Lee was both menacing and charismatic. You couldn't help but love to hate his character throughout the film. Debi Mazar as Cindy also brought an interesting layer of complexity to her role, with her character serving as a constant source of conflict for Mike and the rest of the crew.
I completely agree, Tim. Hopper was definitely at his finest here, playing against type as the villainous Johnny Lee. His chemistry with Mazar was palpable on screen, and it really added depth to their characters' interaction. As for Charles Dance as E.J. Sags, well, what can I say? He managed to bring both heart and humor to his role as the crusty but lovable father figure who just wants what's best for his daughter Cindy.
Yes, that's very true, Thomas. And then there's the wonderful Natalie Macaro who played Maggie. Mike's love interest throughout most of the film. Her performance was both endearing and captivating. You could really feel her character's transformation from a naive young woman into someone more assertive and self-aware as events unfolded around her.
That's right, Tim. Natalie Macaro did an excellent job portraying Maggie's growth throughout the film, especially in light of some of the challenges she faced at the hands of Johnny Lee. Her relationship with Mike served not only as a source of romantic tension, but also highlighted their individual struggles within the confines of this dystopian space setting.
Absolutely, Tom. And I have to say that these performances really elevated Space Truckers from being just another sci-fi comedy to something truly special. Each actor brought their game to this project, which is quite remarkable given its tumultuous production history, as we discussed earlier in our podcast.
You're absolutely right, Tim. Despite all the obstacles they faced during filming, it's clear that everyone involved in Space Truckers put their hearts into making this movie something unique and memorable. And as viewers, We are the ones who ultimately benefit from their hard work and dedication to this project. With that said, I think we can safely say that Space Truckers is a testament to what can be achieved when talented individuals come together despite adversity. It may not have been an overnight success story upon its initial release, but its enduring popularity among fans of sci-fi comedies proves just how special this film truly is. And for those who haven't yet had the pleasure of experiencing Space Truckers firsthand, we highly recommend giving it a watch. You won't be disappointed.
Well, said Thomas. And speaking of Space Truckers' lasting impact on popular culture, I can't help but notice some similarities between this film and other sci-fi properties that have emerged in recent years. For example, there are clear parallels between Johnny Lee's character and the antagonistic corporations found in films like Starship Troopers or even Serenity. The idea of a ruthless organization using any means necessary to achieve their goals seems to be a recurring theme in sci-fi narratives, and Space Truckers definitely helped pave the way for these stories.
Precisely, Tim. I think another interesting aspect that Space Truckers brought to the table was its exploration of themes like corporate greed and social commentary. While it may not have been as overtly political as some other sci-fi films, there were definitely hints throughout the story about the corrupting influence of power and wealth in shaping society. This is something that we've seen play out in various forms across different mediums, from TV series like The Expanse to video games like Fallout. It just goes to show how prescient Space Truckers was in tackling these issues even before they became mainstream concerns.
That's a very good point, Thomas. And it's not just in terms of storytelling that we can see the influence of Space Truckers. Even some aspects of its production design have made their way into other sci-fi properties over the years. For example, take a look at some of the futuristic sets and costumes featured in shows like The Orville or even Star Trek. Discovery, there's definitely an echo of Space Truckers' visual style present in those productions. It just goes to show that sometimes even smaller, more niche projects can leave a lasting mark on their genre.
I completely agree, Tim. And speaking of niche projects, it's also worth noting that Space Truckers helped pave the way for other cult classic sci-fi comedies like Galaxy Quest or even Red Dwarf. These shows took many of the same elements, the cheesy dialogue, the over-the-top characters, and the outrageous situations, but managed to bring something fresh and original to the table. They proved that there was an audience hungry for this kind of sci-fi humor. And without films like Space Truckers leading the way, it's hard to imagine these shows finding their footing in the industry.
That's a great observation, Tom. And on that note, I think we can safely say that Space Truckers has left an indelible mark on sci-fi comedy as a genre. Its unique blend of satire, action, and heart has inspired countless filmmakers, writers, and artists to explore similar themes and storylines in their own works. While it may not have been a box office smash upon its initial release, its enduring popularity among fans is a testament to the power of great storytelling and the lasting impact it can have on our cultural landscape.
Amen to that, Tim. And with that said, I think we've covered quite a bit in this discussion about Space Truckers. But before we wrap things up for today, let me just say one final thing. If you haven't had the chance to watch this film yet, or if it's been a while since your last viewing, do yourself a favor and give it another shot. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but there's no denying its influence on the sci-fi genre as a whole. And who knows, you might just discover a newfound appreciation for this cult classic that has captured the hearts of so many fans over the years.
Absolutely, Thomas. And I think that really captures the essence of what makes Space Truckers such a special film. Despite its flaws, it manages to bring together an incredible cast of characters, each with their own unique story arc. And all of them contribute to the rich tapestry that is this dystopian space opera. And while it may have had a bumpy road to success, Space Truckers has undoubtedly left its mark on pop culture history as we know it.
So true, Tom. It's really a testament to the power of storytelling and how even small projects can have such a lasting impact. And speaking of impact, I think it's safe to say that this film has certainly made an impression on both of us for better or worse. But seriously though, folks, if you haven't yet had the chance to watch Space Truckers, we highly recommend giving it a go. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but trust us when we say that it's well worth your time.
I couldn't agree more, Tom. And with that said, let's wrap up this week's episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. As always, thank you for joining us on our journey through the world of cinema. We hope you enjoyed our discussion about Space Truckers as much as we did. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with your own thoughts and opinions on this cult classic sci-fi comedy. Until next time, folks,